Look closely at the screen right now. These are the final images capturing JaRay Wilson before she disappeared forever. JaRay, 16 years old, a young girl with a bright smile and a bold personality in the small town of Weatherford, Oklahoma. On the night of October 14, 2012, JaRay got into a car with people she trusted. There were no warning signs. No one realized danger was so close. It was a completely ordinary moment, and it was also the last time JaRay was seen. These images are not only the final moments of a life, but the starting point of a tragedy that would leave the entire town forever changed. Weatherford, Oklahoma, is a rural town where traditional values are held high. Life here moves slowly. Neighbors know one another. Children grow up under the watchful eyes of the entire community. The Wilson family was no exception. To those around them, JaRay was the pride of Rodney and Jana Wilson. She was not only a beautiful teenager with a strong personality, but also a girl with a kind heart. At school, JaRay was known as someone willing to stand up for vulnerable classmates. She was not afraid of confrontation, and she did not stay silent in the face of injustice. But behind the happy family photos, a quiet storm began to form as JaRay entered her 16th year. The fracture did not happen overnight. It began with the family's struggle to make a living. Rodney Wilson worked as an oil field laborer. His job required constant travel across states. Some years he was away from home for more than 300 days. The absence of a father during a daughter's transition into adolescence created a psychological gap that was difficult to fill. When Rodney returned from a long assignment, he was shocked to realize his daughter was no longer the same. JaRay had changed. In the way she dressed, in the bold color of her hair, in the new relationships her family did not recognize. She began spending time with older local youths, names often associated with minor troubles in town. And most importantly, JaRay became more withdrawn. She shared less. She spoke less about what was happening in her life. Faced with these changes, Rodney tried to fix things in the only way he knew. He quit his job, stayed home more, closely monitored his daughter's activities. A strict disciplinary regime was imposed, a firm curfew, restricted outings, even random checks to ensure JaRay was not involved with drugs. All results showed she was not violating any rules. But the intense control suffocated the trust between father and daughter. Arguments became more frequent. The atmosphere in the small home grew tense. And then, what no one wanted happened. JaRay chose to leave home. She stayed with friends. She declared she would only return if her parents eased their control. Despite leaving, one habit never changed. JaRay continued to text her mother every night. "I'm okay. I love you." Those short messages were proof that despite her rebellion, JaRay was still her parents' daughter, until the night of October 14, 2012. The night those messages suddenly stopped, JaRay's phone went silent, and from that moment, a 14-month nightmare began. When JaRay Wilson did not return home after October 14, 2012, her family quickly contacted the Custer County Sheriff's Office. But the initial response was not what they expected. Based on early information, authorities believed this was simply a runaway case, a familiar scenario, especially for families experiencing teenage conflict. In their assessment, JaRay was staying with friends, and disappearing for a few days was not considered unusual. As a result, the case was not treated as a high-risk missing person investigation. The Wilson family refused to accept that conclusion. They knew their daughter. JaRay might rebel, she might argue with her parents, but she would never vanish without a message. Throughout the time she was away, JaRay always kept in regular contact with her mother. The nightly texts had never stopped before. The sudden silence convinced the family that something serious had happened. They pushed police to expand the search, shared information on social media, contacted friends, acquaintances, and anyone who had seen JaRay in her final days. Then, a crucial detail emerged. JaRay was last seen getting into a car with Cody Godfrey and Tucker McGee. Both were local young men, not strangers to minor trouble in town. When questioned by police, Tucker McGee appeared unusually calm. He claimed he drove JaRay around town, then dropped her off at an apartment complex to wait for someone else to pick her up. The statement sounded reasonable. No obvious contradictions, no immediate signs of a crime. Police checked the apartment complex, knocked on doors, questioned residents, but no one had seen JaRay there. No cameras captured her. No witnesses confirmed the story. JaRay seemed to vanish immediately after leaving the vehicle. As the search yielded no results, a darker theory spread through the community: human trafficking. In 2012, Oklahoma was facing multiple cases involving exploitation and federal crimes. Interstate highways crossing the state made it a sensitive transit point. The theory quickly gained attention. The Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, which had recently formed a specialized unit for such cases, officially joined the investigation. JaRay became the first case handled by that unit. Another name surfaced in investigative discussions: Gilberto Paz. He was rumored to be involved in local criminal activity and had been mentioned in whispers surrounding JaRay's associations. Rumors spread rapidly. People speculated JaRay may have been groomed, taken elsewhere, held somewhere beyond her family's reach. There was no concrete evidence, but in desperation, every possibility seemed plausible. This theory diverted the investigation for months. The Wilson family, in extreme despair, clung to every lead. Rodney Wilson became a relentless searcher. When he heard JaRay might have been transported by train, he personally went to rail yards, climbed onto freight cars, shined a flashlight into dark corners, calling his daughter's name amid the echo of metal. Jana Wilson turned to psychics, organized prayer gatherings. She believed her daughter was still alive and waiting to be found. The entire town of Weatherford was consumed by fear of an unseen threat. Residents grew suspicious of strangers. Parents restricted their children's movements. Whispers spread everywhere. Meanwhile, the person truly responsible for JaRay's disappearance continued living normally among the community. Week after week, month after month, no clear leads, no breakthroughs. The investigation stalled. Hope within the Wilson family eroded day by day. They did not know whether JaRay was still out there or whether the truth lay somewhere they were not ready to face. Only one thing became increasingly clear. The initial theory was obscuring the truth rather than revealing it. And then, after 14 months of silence, a critical decision was made. Investigators chose to reopen the entire case from the beginning. By December 2013, more than 14 months had passed since JaRay Wilson vanished. Winter covered Weatherford, Oklahoma, with a heavy, cold atmosphere, mirroring the state of the investigation. After months without meaningful progress, law enforcement turned to a last resort. A grand jury was convened. The goal was clear: force those last seen with JaRay to confront the questions they had avoided for over a year. Cody Godfrey entered the interview room unable to hide his tension. For 14 months, he had tried to live as if nothing had happened, but the psychological burden never left him. When questions about the night of October 14th, 2012 were raised, Cody's breathing changed. His eyes avoided contact. His hands clenched tightly. The pressure finally exceeded his limits. Cody lowered his head onto the table. The prolonged silence in the interrogation room made the air feel heavy. And then he could no longer remain silent. The truth began to emerge, piece by piece, in a way no one wanted to hear. There was no human trafficking ring behind JaRay's disappearance, no complex network or interstate conspiracy, just a car ride at night, a group of young people, and a series of poor decisions leading to irreversible consequences. According to testimony that night, JaRay was taken to a remote, vacant area north of Weatherford, a spot frequented by local youths. There, the use of synthetic drugs severely affected the awareness and behavior of those present. The atmosphere shifted rapidly. What began as joking became tense and uncontrollable. When JaRay asked to leave and tried to contact someone to pick her up, an act of violence occurred. That incident directly led to her death, but testimony revealed it did not end immediately. JaRay was left in critical condition. No one sought help. No one called emergency services. Then, a subsequent action eliminated any remaining chance of survival. Those present left the scene and chose to conceal what had happened. Based on Cody's statement, authorities searched the indicated area. But more than a year had passed. The terrain had changed. Weeds had grown thick. Familiar landmarks were gone. Time and nature had erased nearly all traces. The search lasted for hours under intense pressure and near despair, until something unusual was spotted on the ground. Investigators approached cautiously, examined it carefully, and quickly confirmed it was human remains. At that moment, all remaining doubts ended. JaRay Wilson had finally been found. The news was delivered to the Wilson family in the heaviest of atmospheres. For them, it marked both the end of fragile hope and the closure of more than a year of painful waiting. The investigation did not stop there. Another name was soon scrutinized: Caleb McLemore. Caleb had helped conceal the events for many months without reporting to authorities. At first, he refused to cooperate, trying to distance himself. However, under mounting psychological pressure, Caleb eventually admitted his role. He confessed to helping hide the scene and dispose of items linked to JaRay. His statements aligned with information provided by Cody Godfrey. To strengthen the case, investigators continued gathering remaining circumstantial evidence. A phone call was made under close police supervision. During that conversation, Tucker McGee inadvertently revealed key details, demonstrating he was aware of the legal consequences of what occurred. For investigators, that was enough. In March 2015, Tucker McGee's trial took place under intense public attention. The Wilson family sat in the courtroom, facing the person responsible for their loss. Tucker McGee could not provide a clear explanation for his actions. Because he committed the crime as a minor, he did not face the maximum possible sentence. The original sentence was life imprisonment without early review. For JaRay's family, it was a fragile consolation. However, changes in juvenile sentencing laws later altered that punishment. This meant Tucker McGee could be eligible for sentence review after several decades. For the Wilson family, it was a lingering wound, a sense that justice was incomplete. Meanwhile, other individuals involved received varying legal outcomes based on their roles. The case of JaRay Wilson left deep fractures not only in one family, but across the entire Weatherford community. Trust was damaged, the sense of safety was gone. Yet from that loss, an important change emerged. JaRay's law was enacted in Oklahoma, requiring authorities to respond immediately and deploy resources when a minor goes missing, rather than assuming it is a runaway case. JaRay Wilson is gone. But her story has helped prevent similar tragedies in the future. That is the greatest legacy she left behind. Thank you for taking the time to follow today's case file. We hope this story has offered you a deeper perspective on what may lie behind the most ordinary appearances. Stay safe and protect yourselves and those you love. We look forward to seeing you in the next case file.